JGF Amplified, building community through amplifying the voices and vision of innovative educational leaders, practitioners and learners from around South Africa.
Siyazibulisela kuni nonke and welcome to JGF Amplified Jakes Galval Fellowship's premier podcast. I am Mathabo Tlali. As per usual, and I am Vindodo and Lilo Ilolo. I am with Sekoetlane Phamodi from Accountability Lab, South Africa. Good afternoon, Sekoetlane. How are you?
Hi, Mathabo. Thank you for having me here. I am well, thank you.
Oh, great. So please share where you're from, your pronouns, and give us a glimpse of the work Accountability Lab does.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah. So as you've already introduced me, I'm Sekoetlane Phamodi. My pronouns are they and them and theirs. I am based in Johannesburg at the present moment. I've been doing some work, all over the country, sometimes out of the country. So I'm very happy to be back, rooted in South Africa, working with the Accountability Lab as its country director for South Africa. And then a little bit about who the Accountability Lab, or what the Accountability Lab is, who we are, what we do. So we are this institution called a translocal network. What this really means is that we are a community of organizations that share the Accountability Lab identity, values, and some work. We have presence across the world in 11 countries, from everywhere from Nepal through to Mexico. So we have a very broad view of what's going on around social and public sector accountability work, which is really what our core focus is on. What does that mean? Social and public sector accountability really means figuring out ways in which we can bring active citizens and responsible leaders together to support people to live safe and secure lives. A lot of the work that we do does focus on anti-corruption, but our approach is quite different to the usual suspects in that our emphasis is really on positive deviance. So that really means, looking at what is working, what people are already doing, and how we might be able then to bring tools, resources, and ourselves to that work in order to support it, lift it up, and show models of how this can be done, how we can make things better through what already exists.
Thank you so much for that. And really, the point of this podcast is to build community through amplifying the voices and visions of innovative educational leaders, practitioners, learners from South Africa, and just individuals who want to pay it forward when it comes to matters regarding education. So what Accountability Lab stands for around social accountability, which is rooted in citizenship. And we have a firm belief that the classroom is a space of citizenship. And what does that mean for the learner? What does it mean for the educator? What does it mean for government to also recognize this? So we will be stepping into our conversation today, titled The South African Classroom as a Safe Space. I mean, we obviously can see how entirely broad the topic is, contextualized in South Africa. We're speaking about philosophy here. We're speaking about infrastructure here. We're speaking about psychology here. But in the most succinct way that you can muster, Sekoetlane, please do give us a definition of what you feel, in your view, ought to be the definition of a safe space in the context of the South African classroom.
I think that the most obvious things, is that the classroom environment does need to be conducive for teaching and learning. This is really about the relationship that is happening in between teachers and learners, as well as the broader school community, to be able to equip young people with the knowledge, the critical thinking skills, the social skills and interactions that can support their development as full, whole citizens who are able to participate in public life more than only being, prepared or equipped to become workers for industry out there somewhere. So I think that's the first component, perhaps and perhaps the most top of mind component of what a safe and enabling classroom looks like, or safe and enabling teaching and learning environment looks like. I think the second component to this is really about the location of the classroom and the school in the community. Right, and I don't simply talk about it, in terms of kind of geography and infrastructure. Build school here, not there. Make school accessible in these ways. I think it's really also about the school itself being seen and valued as a critical resource to the community in which it resides. And this again requires a two-way relationship, and perhaps even a more than two-way relationship. It's really about members of the community doing what they can to support, protect, defend, participate in the whole life of the school, as it were. So I grew up in a township, a black township, Davidton, and a key aspect of my experience growing up was knowing that, on the way to school or anywhere really, there was first and foremost that social surveillance that was happening, so that young people were safe enough to walk to school. Right, even if they had to traverse very long distances, that there were always adults watching young people in order to care for them, in order to ensure that they were safe, arrived to school safely, and got back home safely, and didn't get involved in any undesirable behaviors or activity along the way. This is a key aspect of what a safe school is. Then there's also the aspect of teachers, parents, and community members working together to problem solve around what is happening in the community that might be impeding or disrupting the ability of learners and teachers themselves to be safe, to be able to do the appropriate teaching and learning that is required in order to improve academic performance and outcomes for young people, as well as to as well as around how do we activate the school and use it as a site of community development beyond the obvious teaching and learning that's happening in that environment.
So as you're speaking about the value, the impact of community, I'm taken back to that 2016 moment at Pretoria Girls High where learners were protesting against the unjust school regulations around hair and hair policies that were targeting Black students and students of color. And it almost felt, when Sekoetlane, that was the first time that the voice of students was centralized in national conversation after 1976. Right? Because even the very construct of schools, we see buildings and we see walls, right? You are in the community, but but the school itself doesn't necessarily need to be representative of a community, right? So I'd like for us to or I'd like for you to speak to how the community can participate in school structures in a way that, because the way that you use your example about walking to school, it almost feels like a practical, organic way of imparting a kind of resource of safety as as a community member. It doesn't feel laborious, and it doesn't require a particular kind of unique skill sets for me to be a part of the process of a student's teaching and learning experience. So in your view, how does an ordinary community member partake in the culture of learning for students?
Okay. I think I'd like to start by saying that, although it hasn't been as visibilized or made legible to us, I think that there are many, many great examples of young people in school communities as well as beyond actually being centered in the conversation. Uh, uh, I often think to or look to the extraordinary work that organizations like Equal Education have been doing in bringing front and center or putting front and center how young people are claiming, owning and shaping the conversation around what they need in their schools in order for them to feel safe, supported and enabled to have a wholesome experience in academic life as well as in their own development as citizens in society. We see this in the protests that they undertake. We see this in the school clubs that these young people are organizing and leading. We see this in the social accountability monitoring exercises that they themselves are leading and bringing their parents and older people in their communities into, to be able to define, what the minimum norms and standards for what a school, a classroom should look like. So I think that the work that we need to do is actually making that a lot more legible, as opposed to only focusing on, what is bleeding, what is broken, and hearing what authorities, including parents, teachers, have to say about young people and their experience without asking the self-same young people themselves, because they're full citizens, right? So I think that's the first thing. And this links me directly to your question around what does an ordinary community person or community member do? How can they participate in the life of a school and of young people in schools, right? Because this really is about citizenship and having a very whole and comprehensive view of what citizenship entails. Citizenship is not about the bus you carry that says born in RSA, citizen of RSA, or wherever the case might be. I think that citizenship is about participation in public life, right? I always say this, that, it takes a village. It really takes a village, more than to raise a child. It takes a village to raise that child. It takes a village to build that village. It takes a village to bring in the resources that village needs in order to be able to solve the problems of that village, right? So it's really about that participation in public life, right from the ground, spiraling upwards and outwards into society at large. Perhaps, defining what is happening in the legislature, defining what ought to be happening in the in government, and defining what ought to be happening in, say, the courts also, right? So what practical steps can we take? One, I think that by listening and observing and listening to what young people are saying and doing, that shows us what their needs are, right? So that's about creating space. We all know young people, we all have young people in our lives and in our immediate communities that we have established relationships with, because next door, right? So that's a start. I think the second thing is about communicating and problem solving with other community members. And that requires a certain degree of organizing, right? We often think of organizing in these big ways that, we are organizing a match. We are organizing a street committee in order to have a match to the union building so that we can have the national action plan, right? But organizing doesn't begin and end there. Organizing is about the day to day. Who are the people in our immediate social networks with whom we share values, with whom we share interests, with whom we share community, right? Community as in a geographic sense, but also community in a sense of values, right? And in doing that, we can then start kind of, connecting with each other about what is needed. What can I bring? I think that COVID really taught us a lot about how community is, this dynamic and extraordinary thing that if we put ourselves and our hearts to it by just offering ourselves as we are, what amazing mutual aid and social relief efforts can be produced out of that. We kept people alive during COVID, people who had no work, people who had no shelter, people who had no access to the key essentials of life and security in life. And this was done through mutual aid. We don't have to solve it all, but we can do what we can where we are. Then the third thing I think is, as we connect with one another, and then as we bring what value or bring what resources that we have available to us, including ourselves as our resource, our time, our attention, our networks, our ability to do the care work the care work over children while parents of children are organizing in another place. I mean, it goes such a long way in order to be able to build and support community efforts that are happening, and particularly around schools, because that means that when in my community, and I know that in the school that my children or the school that my neighbors' children go to, there's a parents' evening, and there's an issue around childcare that prevents or curtails those parents' ability to go to those parents' meetings, those school governing body meetings. I can avail my home for that evening. It's just 3 hours of that evening, so that their time is freed up. It seems like such a small thing, but it is such an enormous thing, because the people who want to be there often can't be there, and they get demotivated from being there, from participating and contributing enormous value to the life of a school community, because of small and simple things like the inaccessibility of childcare. And so we can play those roles. We can be in schools to play that role. We can be in schools to bring things like, or offer things like, maybe you've run out, your copier and printer has run out of paper. It's my commitment to give you at least one ream of paper every month. It goes a long way, because we know that in many, especially under-resourced, we're talking quintile 1 through 3 schools, even while they might have the technology and the equipment there, because of penny pinching and bean counting, there's a limit on what they can do in terms of printing and things, in order to be able to create the resources that they need to enhance the teaching and learning experience in the classroom. So by adding that kind of value to schools through small little interactions, small little contributions that are just within reach, it all adds up and it all multiplies to show members of the immediate school community, and here I'm talking about educators, school leadership teams, and most importantly, learners, that this school is seen, this school is valued, this school is supported, and this school can be great, So I think there are great examples of this, and maybe we can talk about that through the work of some of our integrity icons, if you'd like.
Sure. And I mean, what's really prominent in what she's saying, Sekoetlane, is the value of community and understanding the texture of community for you to understand the needs of parents, right? To understand the needs of children who are students in these spaces. And also what's really sticking out here is how we as a community role model citizenship. And it takes me back to that 2016 moment when you even saw the kind of decolonial language reminiscent of the Fees Must Fall era. There was a kind of that mirroring that was happening. And we also see social media as a site of citizenship because this language is acquired there because all these tall walls, and in certain instances, there aren't walls at all because we assume that the classroom is 4 walls, considering quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools. We limit our impact to going into the physical space and not really seeing how our everyday life has an influence in how students acquire language and how they interpret that language in the context of schools. So you are speaking about the integrity icons, which is phenomenal, which is an endeavor that you are pioneering within Accountability Lab. Could you speak about the teachers that you highlight and why it was so incredibly important that you use your voice to shine light on what is being done as opposed to unpacking what the problem is?
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. So let me maybe start with what the Integrity Icon campaign is. So Integrity Icon is a campaign to name and fame rank and file public servants who are doing the most to really make sure that government works for us, right? Not just in the hallowed halls of the union buildings. We're really talking about teachers in classrooms, community health facilitators, out in remote communities who have to, take wagons and donkeys in order to provide vital health services and health and auxiliary services to people who need them most. We're talking about the security guard, at the hospital, who makes sure that the space is safe, but also supports people to be able to access the services that they need through their knowledge of how the hospital system works, right? So this is a critical thing around identifying and amplifying what is working, and then rallying around those people who embody the kinds of values that we desire and say we need within our public service. Because again, this stuff is about social relations and social interactions. The public service is made of public servants, actual people who work under extraordinarily challenging circumstances to really deliver high impact services to people, even while we can see that those services aren't quite where we need them to be, given the various challenges that our country and our society is facing. So last year, we were able to name 2 of our 5 integrity icons who are teachers. One is Mrs. Joyce Buthelezi. She's a primary school teacher in Richmond, in Bernard Mizeki Primary School. Again, this is an under-resourced school and an under-resourced district, and a lot of the young people who, in fact, a significant number of the young people who attend the school, are struggling at home. There are deep-set problems around poverty, which lead to hunger, which impact on academic performance, as we know. But not only on academic performance, but on the sense of agency and sense of personhood that these young people ought to be developing, ought to be supported to develop at school. Because with low self-esteem, right, because at home there's no food, because my parents don't work, it becomes really difficult and disempowering for them to have a sense that actually, I'm on a journey, I'm on a holistic journey of developing myself so that I can be able to escape these conditions and bring my family and my community along with me. Right, because this is often the case for especially young Black people, even today, from under-resourced communities, usually Black townships and rural communities, right? People like myself, And so the work that she's been doing, more than the teaching and learning, has really been through just her attentiveness and her commitment to inculcating the values of kindness and compassion within the school community through the work of the school community. She's been really working on and developing programs that young people can participate and co-create in around improving food security for needy learners. Everyone contributes what they can, right? You are in the garden, you are learning about how to grow and tend to food, and then you're also sharing that food with those people who need it most, right? Your peers. There's the work. She's been doing a lot of work around anti-bullying campaigns, but not in the direct sense of don't do this, do that, but more in a sense of how do we build a sense of compassion and kindness? How do we practice compassion and kindness in the classroom, outside of the classroom, at extramural activities? And one of the key facilities, two of the key facilities that she's been doing this through has been through the Girl Guides program that she initiated at the school, where young people are where young girls are able to learn practical life skills, right? Practical survival skills, while also as young girls are able to kind of grow and develop together to craft a vision of sisterhood, if you will, that we would like to see and so desperately need more of in society. And then on the other side, she also convenes a scouting group which brings all young people together, regardless of their gender and gender identity, to learn together, these same survival skills, these same social skills, these same the same sense of citizenship and social responsibility. And all of that builds together to craft a new kind of citizen for our society and for the future. So this is crucial work that she's doing. And then on the other side, we have an extraordinary principal, the head of the school leadership team of Solomon Mahlangu Senior Secondary High School in Kariga, what used to be called Uitenhage in the Eastern Cape. This is Principal Mncedi Mtengwana. Principal Mncedi Mtengwana is, he's a maths and science teacher. That's really what his background is. It's all he wanted to do. It's all he wanted to do, coming again from that appreciation that if we can promote STEM and STEM skills for young people, there's a great opportunity for them to ride on that wave, ride on that knowledge and those skills in order to be able to fill the critical skills shortages that our society and our country is seeing and experiencing, and in that then be able to accelerate uplifting themselves, their families and their communities from poverty and the social ills that come with it, right? And Kariga is a particularly Kwanobuhle in Kariga. It's a place where, because of low employment, the low levels of employment, the low social outcomes as a result of that, and because of poverty, there are high levels of there are high levels of substance abuse and also other antisocial behaviors, including crimes, right? This is depressing young people, and young people in that community look around them and have this vision that, well, I'm not going to get out of here, so I might as well just continue with what's happening here, because what's going to happen, right? But through this focused leadership of building and reintroducing core values of discipline, and discipline more than just, you will listen to authority, but discipline as a sensibility around we bring all of ourselves to our work with our whole hearts, consistently. We are then, and through that we are able to do better. So that has been something that he's inculcated in the school among both the teachers there as well as among learners there. But more than that, again, just like Mrs. Buthelezi, bringing in the sensibility of how do we bring compassion and kindness as a practice in the school, you know? And it's through things like instituting a zero tolerance policy around bullying, especially in that high school age, which is something that can really disrupt and throw young people off course in terms of their school journey and the consolidation of their sense of identity as citizens in society. Bringing in again, or contributing again, the school itself as a site for a food garden, the food garden that is then run by members of the community. So again, using existing resources in the community and combining them, the school and community members, in order to be able to improve food security, not least including through the school nutrition scheme at school. So young people at school don't have to worry about hunger, right, in order to be able to complete matric, right? They can take food home with them so that they don't have to make dastardly decisions, between whether I go to school and finish school, or I ngiyaphuma ngiyaqabalaza and I hustle for a quick job so that I can be able to put food on the table tonight, because maybe we've had one too many a night without food in our belly, right? So it's bringing these kinds of facilities together. But what blows my mind away the most, really what blows my mind away the most about the way that Principal Mtengwana has really thought through and implemented a program that builds community while also meeting the needs of his learners, particularly those who are in distress, has been through his one school, one police person, and one social worker campaign. Again, because of issues related to the insecurity that comes with a socioeconomically distressed environment that is also suffering under the burden of substance abuse, right? Alongside unemployment, alongside poverty. He noticed that there were young people in a school who were coming to school under the influence of substances, be it alcohol, be it dacha, be it other kinds of narcotic drugs, right? And this was disrupting the school environment, but it was also making not only the learners and teachers in the environment feel insecure, but it was leading to the insecurity of those using students or learners themselves, right? And so what he did was, as opposed to, taking a hard line on it, he invited a social worker and police officers into the school to bring support, non or the kind of support that doesn't rely on punishment, but rather it relies on listening to where the needs are, identifying strategies and to fill the gap, and then supporting young people, their parents, and their immediate community in order to work together and collaborate around solving the problem, so that these young people could stay in school, finish school, and improve their outcomes. And through the success of that program, just around that cohort, there is now a social worker on call, a police officer on call, a nurse on call, working together, bringing, all of the key public services on offer at a basic level, right, into the school and make them available through the school in order to support young people so that they can have a sense that, actually, I can do this, that school is the place to be. It is a safe and enabling environment where I am well supported to be the best that I can be. And I can tell you today, you can Google the school if you'd like, but you can see, this is a top performing school in the district and in the province. We are seeing some of the, the top 5 learners of, or matriculants of each year. At least one of them comes from that school, and that is testament to the kind of leadership that we see from Principal Mtengwana and the kind of support he has from the school community as a whole, teachers, learners, and community members.
You know what, as you're speaking, Sekoetlane, I'm reminded of how the interpersonal relations that we have with service providers, with people who are called to serve state, were broken in those interpersonal relations, right? And through this program, or through this identification of people who are embedded in their communities, embedded in schools, who are trying to, with whatever skills they have on hand, to reform the state of community through the classroom, it is through these very interpersonal relations that faith is now restored, right? And going back to the idea that a school is a reflection of a community, and if a community's hopes and aspirations and first priority is reflected in how the attitudes of schools and the attitudes of students and the attitude of teachers are seen played out, and with all Principal Mtengwana who are going to say, you know what, the schooling space is a resource. And as a result, as a community, with whatever resource we have, Sinabo Tishara, we have teachers, we have social workers, and we have police individuals who are going to be in space to co-create a community that is reflective of our aspirations, our hopes, and our inherent belief of who we are as individuals. It takes me back to the work, or to the words rather, of Dr. Pedro Mzileni when he says that it is unfounded, the idea that parents take children out of their said communities for them to go school in a community that doesn't necessarily resonate with the value of the people that they grow up with, right? And that's a thing that we've normalized. And we don't address the why. And beyond the conversation of infrastructure, beyond the penny pinching, but the actual hope and the actual belief that we have that we ourselves can reproduce what you're now saying are individuals who are noted as top performing, and they come from us. They're representative of who we are. And that's really, really powerful. Sekoetlane. And I would like for you to just speak to our community here, the JGF community. Iviwe Mthumbu rejects the idea of the safe space when he says that a safe space alludes to the idea that someone else creates it and you just walk into it. And as a result, he proposes the idea of a brave space, because a brave space is an invitation to all the stakeholders to contribute to the betterment of the teaching and learning experience. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly support the sentiment. I always say, particularly in my work with young people, which is a key strand of our strategy. Building the new tier of leadership, building new kinds of citizens, is that instead of asking somebody somewhere to do something, we have to be that somebody right here doing it, doing something to respond to our context. And so I certainly agree that our conception of a safe space needs to be an intimate one, right? One that is about us and our conduct, our values, our norms, our behaviors, our aspirations, as you say. At the top of our conversation, you raised this example of young people in schools now having to do the work of anti-racism in their schools, right? These are the young people who are plucked out of, often plucked out of their communities, of people who look like them, who have shared values with them, who care for them as more than just children who have to go to school, but as full, whole people with different dimensions of experience and contribution to society. And they go into alien environments which don't quite align with, what they look like and what they come with, right? Certainly, this is still, the hangover of where we come from as a society. You can't end at least 400 years of colonialism and apartheid as a continuum in just 27 years, right? A lot of great work has been done to break down the boundaries, to open up schools and open up public institutions in order for, the mixing and the meeting of different kinds of people with different kinds of backgrounds. Um, uh, 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 and to shape and craft this new kind of society. But at the same time, the creation of the safe and enabling environment requires an attunement to the particular needs of all of our young people, and not just blanketing, what their needs might look like or what we think are. And so I think that, the work was valuable because young people were able to claim that space and shape it for themselves, making that what was supposed to be a safe space, but was really an unsafe space, into a brave space that could be transformed, that could be reshaped, reorganized, and be able to be claimed by all. Right. But at the same time, we also do need to be thinking a little bit more intentionally around how do we build what we have here, because we ultimately want in every community, right, in spite of and as we transform the inequality and inequity that has been produced by the spatial architecture of apartheid, and what it meant for resourcing schools, resourcing communities. We certainly still do want to, or at least I hope we would like to live in a society in which I can wake up in any community in this country, and I can feel safe, comfortable, and confident that my young people, my children, can be my children, my nieces, my nephews, my siblings can be able to walk to the closest school and be assured of a quality education on par with anyone else, regardless of their resourcing, regardless of their socioeconomic profile, regardless of their racial profile as a proxy for socioeconomic standing, right, and outcomes. And so we do need to be doing a little bit. We do need to be a bit more intentional about the work that we are doing, and this is why I value the work of people like, or integrity icons like Prince Pontengwana, and Mrs. Joyce Buthelezi, but also the work of civil society. Through the likes of the Equal Education Campaign, through the likes of the Zero Dropout Campaign, through the likes of the Teachers Can Network. All of these key all of these institutions or facilities, and the many, many more that exist. I'm thinking about the Xenix Foundation, for instance, who do extraordinary work around supporting education systems in South Africa, right, through rigorous research and practical application. Institutions such as the JGF Foundation, who are doing a lot of work around building communities around promoting and sustaining quality education for young people who are most marginalized, right, who are least seen. All of it comes together because we start to frame collectively, what our aspirations are. I think there was something that and I'd maybe like to close this, to close off with something that one of my mentors once said to me around, the work of advocacy and the work of social justice. The people who come to social justice work are usually people at the margins. And those people at the margins often view themselves, we view ourselves, as these atomized subjects or objects right on the edge without a lot of power or ability to shape what is happening at the center. But truly, if we can just look to our left and to our right, for the others like us, others who share the same kinds of values that we do and have the same aspirations as we do, who are themselves at the margins or who view themselves at the margins, and we just reach out on either side, we can, from the margins, push the center to the left, right? To a more wholesome kind of society that is embedded, or that is rooted in kindness, in compassion, in mutual and social care, in collective work and awareness of each other's needs, in sacrifice, in sharing, and all of that good stuff that makes good societies great.
And as you're speaking, Sekoetlane, you speak a lot around agency, and the icons that you note are individuals who, in a particular lull, in a community lull, if you will, chose to assert their citizenship in ways that are beneficial to the community at large, which is particularly important in the context of South Africa, where we are leaning towards, being a welfare state, where our government is almost seen as a paternalistic function, and that kind of dynamic lulling the citizen from understanding their agency, their capacity to define, to name as per their own conviction and normatives. This idea of constantly looking outside of yourself for help because there were particular prescriptive promises that were made in exchange for political power that we are experiencing, and also the idea of school as a function of state, right? Because once we have distanced ourselves from the classroom being a space where citizens are formed, we understand power dynamics in those environments. We understand ourselves in relation to the world around us. As you're speaking about, people leaving their communities to go to alien spaces. And when you are in those alien spaces, your space that you call home being villainized, and that space being demonized, and you are carrying this, right? It reminds me of the reflections of former alumni who came from these former Model C spaces and private school spaces where, 2-3 black girls walking together and you're already seen as a conglomerate that is about to start a riot, right? I know very well in my school terminology, like, don't make a noise, this is not a taxi rank. Whereas a taxi rank is a space of economy for many mothers and for many fathers and brothers and whatever kind of individual that's in space, right? So all of this boiling down to where not in your community, what are you contributing and how are you contributing to the redefining of who you are as a people? So we don't need to look outside of ourselves and outside of our communities to be, right? To excel, to progress. So with that, I'd like for you to just remind our listeners. Sekoetlane Sakuva. Listen, Sakuva, you sound amazing. You sound great. But I'm here and all I can be is a Twitter warrior when an Enoch from Parktown Boys is no more because of negligence within a school context. All I can be is an individual who is triggered when all of these cases of inequality in various forms surface in news streams, and I feel completely disempowered. How do I actively leave my house and affect change and contribute?
Okay. A couple of thoughts here. I think the first thing is that, in a society such as ours, where so much work has to be done to reverse the injustices that were committed and continue to be experienced across generations, right? As well as attend to the injustices that are being committed today when they needn't be, right? And I think here, and I'd like to signal here very clearly, corruption, maladministration, a neglectful state, authoritarianism, it's very easy and only natural, I think, for us to feel so completely overwhelmed that about our circumstances and our ability to effect change in those within our immediate circumstances, when the very basic things of life just aren't there. I think that we 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 need to be very clear here, right? The state has to exist, and the state has to exist for a very specific and clear purpose: to protect us from vulture capitalism and the excesses of neoliberalism, which is destroying us all and is producing the injustices that we see in corruption, maladministration, state neglect, and so forth, right? Corruption happens because someone is corrupting, right? And often, and as we saw through the Commission to State Inquiry, and as we've always seen and known, right, the private sector is deeply imbricated in corruption, just very organized, just very well armed with good lawyers, right? So they're doing something. The question then becomes, what do we do? We can't expect people to go over and above their means. That's a very obvious and very clear thing, right? If I don't have shelter, I'm going to be focused on shelter, another job of the state. If I don't have food, I'm going to be focused on making sure I'm fed, right? In order to, do the additional work. So what can we do? Mutual aid and support, right? It comes from a very simple and small thing: values of compassion and care and kindness. Seeing there is a problem, right? Asking myself, what can I do to bring myself to the problem and respond to it as best as I can within my means, right? And then doing that thing and then walking right along, keeping it moving, voting with your feet. This happens all the time, everywhere, especially in communities such as the one that I grew up in, a Black township, Davidton, right? Where when my neighbor did not have tea, when my neighbor did not have sugar, when my neighbor did not have salt, we gave them what we had: get a porfu, maize meal, right? It's not just a cute little quirk that we talk about as what a fab thing that a township is. It speaks to our awareness of each other and how we make each other people, right? You make a person of me and I make a person of you by being there to witness one another, support one another, care for one another, right? That's really where it starts, because by alleviating that small burden, it opens up time for people. And we saw this, there's another great example in which we saw this. The 350 social relief of distress grant. The significant thing about that grant and why it has really brought up this upswell of work, of advocacy and support for a universal basic income grant is that when we were in the sticks at the height of COVID, knowing that there was access to that 350 Rand meant that our time was freed up in order to be able to do other things that we needed, right? And in doing that, that effort multiplies. And as it multiplies, we are gradually able then to affect change within our immediate circumstances, see that change work, learn from how that change works in order to scale it up.
Yeah.
To affect change even beyond ourselves.
Yeah. And the quote unquote politics of the stomach will trump every other politic. And if we can deal with that and community see each other's needs, then we're able to ideate. It also avails space for us to innovate within and amongst ourselves, because we're not thinking about the roof over your head. You're not thinking about the next meal. We've got you covered. And it really speaks to us having to be deliberate about moving outside of this isolatory conditioning due to COVID-19, this isolatory condition also, which also comes with people having their own individual aspirations, which are individualistic as opposed to communal. So we are able to access each other's creativity in order to make our communities work. Because the savior doesn't look like one individual, doesn't look like an organization. It looks like people's investments with time, with innovation, with creativity, with the legwork. And by coexisting in the way in which you've mentioned, gives people time to be able to do that. So siyabulela kakhulu Sekoetlane. Please, where can people catch you on social media?
All right then. So on social media, you can find Accountability Lab South Africa at Account Lab SA. One word, Account Lab SA, across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have an Instagram. We really encourage you also to look at our website, accountabilitylab.org, and nominate your integrity icons, people that everyone knows, a rank and file public servant who is doing the most to make the most happen, right? So, nominate someone. You can do that on integrityicon.org. You'll find the South Africa page there. Open it up. See the portfolio of integrity icons that we've had over the last 4 years. We're in our 5th year for this, and then make a nomination. And then lastly, to find me online, you can find me on Mr. Phamodi, MrPhamodi. I am on Twitter, so you can find me there, and then we can have a chat.
Thank you so very much. And we really do not take for granted your time, Sekoetlane, and the wealth that you come in when you enter space. And you've chosen to enter the JGF space, and you have added value to the work that we are doing. We are of the belief that we cannot do this alone. Hence, this podcast exists. So we hear what you are doing and how it links up with with what we are doing, and create that chain as we go along. Nkosi kakhulu. Bethuna ndihluthi. Kihutsi mentally, kihutsi spiritually. I am challenged as an individual, and we hope that Nani, where you are equally as challenged. Sikhona Nati as JGF on social media. On Twitter, we are at JG Fellowship. This is also the link on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. It is at Jake's Chalval Fellowship on YouTube, rather. And on IG, Instagram, it is at Jakes_Chalval_Fellowship. Dim Mathabo Tlali. We will see you on the other side of this. Take care. Bye.